My name is Sierra Ward, and today I am here interviewing Patti Criswell, who is a clinical social work therapist. I am partnering with the Southwest Michigan Journalism and Collaborative to have a conversation revolving around anxiety in adolescence. Patti is a recognized expert in the area of anxiety, relational aggression, and self-esteem. Her work includes individual and family therapy with girls and their parents, as well as working with adult women. Additionally, she is an instructor at Western Michigan University, where she teaches both grad and undergrad courses in the School of Social Work. She is a writer and has numerous books and articles serving her as an author, editor, and consultant of the American Girl Company since 1998. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I know that was a intro about you, but please once again introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about how you got into the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so my name is Patti Criswell, and I've been a therapist for, like you said, over 30 years. So I always had a heart for social justice and for, trying to make a difference in the world. And when I started in social work, I kind of fell into doing therapy, and I've kind of followed that, my entire career. Midway through, I started teaching here and writing. I was really, really lucky to make connections with the American Girl Company, and so I got to kind of feel like I was making a difference on a larger scale, and then kind of on a smaller scale with the individual work that I do as well.
Yeah. So how did working in the girl power section of American Girl, how did that transfer over into you getting into therapy and mental health focus?
Yeah, well, I had been a therapist for quite a while.
Okay.
And that's why they brought me in as a consultant. And then I think I consulted so much, they were like, you know what, how about you just start writing?
Nice.
So I did. Yeah.
Nice.
And, we really wanted to move the needle on bullying. We really wanted to kind of bring that to light. They gave me a lot of latitude in what I wanted to write about. And we did some great brainstorming and hopefully have made a difference. So
that's exciting.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to diving deeper into your passion for supporting youth. But before we do that, can you recall one of your fondest childhood memories?
Childhood memories. My dad was a veterinarian. And so we always had stray animals. And I think the first social work I ever did was my dad and I, he let me start my own animal shelter. And so, I have great memories of that and making it my own and trying to make a difference for the animals and kind of networking and trying to find them homes. And so I had a pretty idyllic childhood that way.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Did you have pets growing up?
Always. And always some strays some runts that I was nursing or something,
Yeah, that's really fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So our hope today is that this message reaches any young person, parent, student or college student, or anyone else who is struggling with anxiety or depression. I want to say that you are loved and supported. And if you ever need to talk with someone about your mental health, know that that's a sign of strength. Life be lifing, okay? So today's mission is to educate and uplift. So let's get into the science of anxiety. Could you tell us a little bit about what anxiety is?
So it's the body's response to stress, which we need. I mean, if we see a bear in the woods, we need to have a chemical response. So when we think about anxiety, it's a beautiful thing. Thank goodness. Otherwise, we'd walk in front of cars. Thank goodness that we have that system built in. It becomes an anxiety disorder when it's no longer serving us. Our responses are misguided, they're exaggerated, they're irrational. And that's when there's this tipping point, and that's where it becomes problematic for people. There's lots of different kinds of anxiety as well. There's social anxiety, health anxiety, there's fear of being a victim of a crime, things like that, fear of even being uncomfortable in any way. So when we are looking to treat anxiety, we first have to kind of figure out what flavor it is, what it looks like, and then kind of plug in treatment measures that can get that person balanced again.
Yeah, so you're kind of saying we have to see what type of anxiety it is to treat it. How might anxiety show up in a young person? What are some of the signs?
Yeah, so like I said, an irrational response. So There's different kinds. Tactile anxiety. Let's say a kid doesn't like the way jeans feel or tags feel. We would look at that. If we say, well, then we'll buy you clothes so that you never have to feel that, anxiety will take as much room as you give it. So we tend to see less anxiety in less accommodating places. So, very well-meaning, wonderful people will try to accommodate their child's anxiety and soothe their fears, where really what we need to do sometimes is confront those fears and set boundaries around them. And that's a lot of the work that I do with kids, especially, yeah.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. And so a lot of times we hear about anxiety, and we're hearing a lot more now. Sometimes it's like a generational thing, like maybe your parents or your grandparents didn't really talk about it, but now it's a bit more accepted. So my question from you, from your professional standpoint, is anxiety worse now, or are we just now talking about it?
It's much worse. Yeah, there is no doubt. In all my years, I've seen a definite shift. It is so pervasive. Absolutely. So there's a whole lot of it. And it is being talked about more, for sure. Doesn't necessarily mean it's being treated, but it is being talked about more. And, there's concern, we're looking at why. Why is this generation so anxious? And I think we have some answers. And so the hope is that through kind of education and figuring out, we can mitigate some of the things that are causing so much anxiety.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And we definitely are going to talk about some of those reasons as to why anxiety is higher now in adolescence. But for now, how can we ensure that anxiety doesn't drive our decision making? Because sometimes when we get anxious, it causes us to do things that we don't want to do, or it takes too much space in our life. How can we kind of keep hold of anxiety?
Yeah. So when you're in that anxious loop, let's say you've reached that tipping point, right? And it's it's not serving you anymore.
Yeah.
Right? We have to rely on the people we trust the most as resources to say that's not a rational thought. And then the other piece to that is, we can look even wider. We can look, I call it like the rule of the masses.
Yeah.
If you lined up 100 people and put them in the same situation, would they be alarmed? We have to look around ourselves and check ourselves on, if this was a thing, wouldn't everyone be worried about this? Or are there people that I trust that they've got this? They're taking care of this.
Yeah.
I got to stay in my lane. This is not a worry I need to have.
Yeah.
And so we look at things like that to try and, bring that anxiety level down.
Yeah, I really like that. And the thing with anxiety is, like, when you feel it, you feel like you are forced to make a decision. Is it sometimes good to kind of wait till your anxiety calms down and then make a big decision?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cooler heads prevail, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we talk about the rise of anxiety, what are some things that you're seeing within our generation that may be causing anxiety to take place in our lives?
Yeah. We look at kind of 5 main things when we're evaluating for anxiety. Sleep is a big one. We always are evaluating sleep, and people are getting less of it.
Yeah.
And lower quality. So that's always where we start. You have to regulate your sleep. However we can work on someone's sleep hygiene. And people are chronically getting under what is necessary for their age and stage. And granted, there's a range there. Some of us need more sleep, some of us get less, but they're, way under. Kids are getting way under what they need. So that's a part of it. They're also getting lower quality sleep.
Yeah.
And then eating, where, there's a lot of kids that aren't getting the nutrition that they need. Certainly protein. Kids come to college maybe, and they're eating a lot of mac and cheese. They're eating a lot of Doritos, whatever it might be, and they're not getting really good protein. And that's essential to kind of ward off anxiety and depression. So we look at what they're eating, what they're sleeping, exercise usually isn't as big a deal for young people, but sometimes it is. And then we look at screen time, and boy, that's been, based on frequency, intensity, and duration. So how much they're using, how intensely, that absolutely correlates with anxiety and depression and anger. And so we see changes when there's excessive screen time on the cognitive level, social, and psychological. So on cognitive, we might see decreased attention, decreased impulse control, focus, that kind of thing. On the social, we might see a lack of skills in kind of social reciprocity, asking others how they are, being able to kind of converse. Certainly lack of empathy. We see lack of empathy. Psychological side, we see anxiety, we see depression, we see anger issues. Yeah. So, for parents, they have to really look at, the telltale sign is when you try to take the device away and your child goes into an anxious loop or panics. That's when you know you're in hot lava. That's when you know your kid needs some help. You're bordering on addiction or addicted. Yeah.
So those were all great points. So we touched on sleep, eating, exercise, screen time.
Yeah.
Was there a fifth one?
Physical touch.
Physical touch.
Thank you. Yeah. And, that's why therapists always talk about the family dinner. Having someone, sitting with someone in close proximity, looking at them, talking to them. Yeah. That's why tucking in is so important, hugging and touching. Those kinds of things produce oxytocin. They help a kid feel safe and held. And that just decreases anxiety.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so when we talked last week about some of these things, and you just really gave me some great tips on how to improve that. And I know sometimes it gets tricky for parents trying to make sure all these areas of their kids' lives, and same with college students, we have so many things. How can we balance all of these things of like making sure we're actually prioritizing our health?
Yeah, well, and sleep is hard. If you have an exam, that kind of thing. So we do the best we can with sleeping, with eating. You're walking a long way to a dining hall or you can't afford food or whatever it might be. So we do the best we can with those main big areas. But we can also teach a lot of coping skills too. When anxiety hits, rather than quickly trying to pacify the need, we can challenge the need. We can encourage resilience. We can have faith in our children's ability to be uncomfortable. Anxiety sometimes is confusing being uncomfortable with being unsafe. And kids are clearly not unsafe, most of the time here, almost all of the time. So, being uncomfortable doesn't have to be something we fear. Like you can be uncomfortable and be okay.
Yeah. And kind of just like enforcing that self-talk, because I know something that would really give me anxiety is one of my classes. It was accounting. Shout out to the accounting department. I had an accounting class, and it was like almost every time I sat in there, I could just feel the anxiety coming up. And so later throughout the semester, I kind of just had to like work on my self-talk. Like, it's okay if I don't know all the answers. It's okay. What are some recommendations that you have on improving that self-talk? How can we talk ourselves out of anxiety? Is that possible?
Absolutely. I mean, the reason you were able to do that is because you had people in your life saying, you got this, you're okay, go on, you can do it, you're going to be fine. So we need to really be in our children's lives enough that they hear that. But I would also say we want them to do the work too. So to say like, how can you calm yourself down right now? What do you need to say to yourself? When kids hear themselves, or what were you proud of today? People ask that at the dinner table, the roses and thorns. When you hear your own voice hyping yourself up day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, it is game changing.
Oh, for sure.
Because having your parents say, I'm proud of you, there's kind of an expiration date on that. You hit puberty and you're like, I get it, right? You're my mom, you have to be. But when you hear yourself saying, I'm proud of me, here's what I did today to make a difference in the world, here's what I did today, I set a goal, I reached a goal, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Right? So we got to encourage our young people to develop that self-talk. Now, let's say you get to adulthood and you don't have that. It's like a muscle.
Yeah.
And you're not going to believe it in the beginning. You got to fake it till you make it. You've got to really train yourself, just like you would in a gym, to be able to set goals and reach them and encourage yourself.
Yeah.
And develop that inner voice, that inner wisdom.
Yeah, for sure. And so that definitely brings up a good point of your mental health as a child and sometimes how you bring your childhood trauma into adulthood. What are some ways to kind of combat that? I know therapy is a really good thing to kind of go through some of that childhood trauma, but what other ways can you suggest for maybe like college students who have things from their childhood and it's taking up too much space?
Yeah. I mean, we all have things from our childhood, right? There's no one right way, and trauma is one of those big words, right? So, if there's severe and profound trauma, that's a lot to unpack. If we, but for the vast majority of people, they can look at their issues and say, what kind of woman do I want to be? What kind of man do I want to be?
Yeah.
If you look at your parents' relationships and you admire them and want to emulate them, you're really lucky. But if they're not what you want for yourself, then you need to learn a different way. And the glorious thing about, being a college student or just the internet is there is an abundance of information. So being really intentional about who you want to be. How do I want my life to look? Instead of just kind of going with emotions and going with what comes naturally.
Yeah.
If that's not the life you want, then what comes naturally, you're going to have to retrain and relearn. And people can do that and be empowered to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So you kind of mentioned those relationships that we see when we get older. So could you talk a little bit about relationships, whether that's platonic or romantic? How do those relationships affect our anxiety? And also, how does our anxiety affect those relationships?
Well, anxiety affects relationships in a big way because it's exhausting. To be in a relationship with someone who's highly anxious is really hard. It's really difficult. And, sometimes people feel like they're missing out on things. It's a stressor, which only drives the anxiety up more. So certainly in romantic and loving relationships and friendships too, we have to be really careful about what we ask of our partners, right, and our friends. Now, on the other side of that, relationships can, hopefully bring out the best in us, encourage our resilience, having faith in each other. Relationships can be really healing because what we all crave and what is at the root of a lot of anxiety is feeling accepted, feeling like someone you don't have to do anything else but be you. We want to be safe. We want to be accepted. We want to be free. We just want to be, ourselves and have that be enough.
Yeah.
Right? And healthy relationships, that's what they give us. In unhealthy relationships, when we're not getting our needs met, those are hurdles to jump. And you got to know when there's too many hurdles, when this isn't serving me anymore. And it takes a lot of bravery.
Yeah, for sure. So you talked about also in relationships of being an individual, and I think that's really important too. Can you remind me of the quote about the temple?
Yeah, it's Gibran says, the pillars of the temple stand apart.
Yeah. So,
if you think of your relationship like a temple, there's got to be two, distinct pillars.
Yeah.
And if there's only one, and you're trying to glob onto that, it's not sustainable. In every relationship, certainly people have different territories, but there needs to be a sense of equality and mutual respect. And that's, in this country, that's what freedom means. That's what, women have worked decades, to earn. And that's something definitely worth fighting for.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's always a really interesting topic about how that shows up in our relationships. So kind of moving more towards like the adolescent space once again, how can teens and young people reach out when they need support, and what can parents and supporters do to kind of curate that safe space?
Yeah. Notice. right? Be in tune enough with your kid. Like I said, if you go to bed at night and you haven't looked at your kid, you haven't spoken to them in paragraphs, you haven't spent any time with them, you got to check yourself on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So banking time, there's nothing like time. Nothing. So definitely quantity matters, and quality of time matters as well. And so when people are just segregated in on their machines, kids aren't getting what they need. So that intimacy is really like the haves and have-nots right now.
Yeah.
So parents just show up for your kid and notice them and help them to feel that safety and that acceptance. One of my favorite authors, Mary Pfeiffer, talks about building a wall between kind of your family and the outside world, so that when you walk through the door, you are home. And it feels like home. And it feels like you're one of us, period,
Yeah.
And that really, really helps kids feel that sense of groundedness.
Yeah.
They're not just kind of out there floating, And so definitely time. And then, if we're not omnipresent, there's all sorts of factors that can, a bad boyfriend, a mean friend, whatever it might be. And so I think knowing when to reach out for help.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot for kids. There's emergency text lines and hotlines. There's, resources within schools, not enough, but there are some, and if there was a silver lining to COVID, it certainly has made therapy more accessible.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's great. So, moving in, we got a couple more questions here. What are some coping strategies that you recommend? So this can be for pretty much like any age. How can we get through anxiety?
Yeah. So, with severe anxiety, these likely won't work. But just what you're kind of talking about, accounting class anxiety, we always start with the breath. We want our heart rate to kind of slow, right? So some people will even say, put your hand on your heart. But we want to start with the breath, right? So we breathe the 4s, up 4, hold 4, down 4, wait 4. And that belly breathing. And that's a muscle, too, that it takes a while to kind of learn to breathe out, like there's a balloon in your lower belly, and to kind of learn that belly breathing. So we always start with the breath.
Okay.
Water is kind of a universal anxiety reliever. So we can sip hot, we can chug cold, we can splash it on our face, we can wash our hands, but getting to water.
Yeah.
And getting to a mirror also helps us. So think of like the Inside Out movie, if you're staring at your own eyes, it kind of wakes up that wise self.
Yeah.
Kind of wakes up our wiser self, our thinking part that can say, calm down.
Yeah.
It's okay. We talk about finding your feet, like where are my feet? Where am I? Evaluating ourselves. Am I uncomfortable or am I unsafe?
Yeah.
We talk about scaling is a really good one. Scale of 1 to 10. Am I in danger right now? No, I'm just sitting in a class that makes me feel inadequate.
Yeah, exactly.
I will get through this, right? So my body, may feel like, the alarms are going off.
Yeah.
But, so it's activating that thinking part of the brain in as much as we can. Distractions obviously will shake some people out of it.
Yeah.
So anything, sometimes in more moderate anxiety, we'll talk about, to shake yourself out of it, do something nice for someone.
Yeah, that's good.
Right? Because it gives us a little dopamine. It activates that. Hug someone for at least 20 seconds. That gives us that oxytocin release. So we kind of look at these brain chemicals and say, how can I just kind of get my boost?
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned going to distractions, and obviously we want to make sure that we're going to healthy coping mechanisms, because there are definitely unhealthy coping mechanisms such as substance abuse and things like that. One thing that I really do try to be mindful of is during those moments of anxiety, not going to social media to scroll. Can you talk about what that does to our brain?
Yeah. So it affects a part of our brain. It stimulates a part of our brain that increases anxiety. So, it is a distraction. It can totally take our mind off things. But if we do it too long, depending on who you read, 15, 20 minutes is kind of the max. You do it too long, there's an adverse effect because your brain it's like a Hot Wheels car, it keeps going after you're done, and it's stimming on that social media. So much better to call a friend and be distracted, much better to kind of, clear your head rather than fixate on one thing for a long period of time.
Yeah, and when we comes to like reels, we're scrolling and every couple seconds it's something new. Yeah. And then sometimes it's like this false sense of like perfection on your phone. Like, my problems are too much, let me just go to social media. So yeah, being mindful about that, I've noticed, has really been good. Like, take that walk, get some fresh air, things like that. Yeah. So one last question, as I think about anxiety and how I've even seen it kind of increase and the conversation get bigger throughout my time frame, I'm interested to know, what will things be like in the next 10 years, around the time when I'm having kids? What are some of the things that like I should be alarmed for or be prepared for?
Yeah. I'm no prophet, but if we can get beyond the era where we're normalizing deceit, we're normalizing cruelty, divisiveness, that drives anxiety up for everyone. And if we can get beyond that, if we can, move to a place where people do feel accepted and safe and free, that will naturally lower the collective anxiety. My hope and my prayer is that we don't go backwards. Yeah. That we go forward and we move beyond this divisive time to a place where people can once again kind of feel a sense of ease.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important that we do take time for our mental health and get ourselves together so it doesn't continue to poison future generations to come. Yeah. Are there any other resources or any other feedback that you like to give the audience before we close today?
I think we need to, I mentioned this earlier, but really evaluate the effects of machines in your world and your relationships. Are they serving you or not? Yeah. You mentioned getting outside. There's so much data on getting outside. With kids, there's an effort to try and, get outside 1,000 hours a year. Get your kid outside 1,000. I read a statistic recently that American children spend 94 to 97% of their time indoors. So getting outside, and, we're lucky in Michigan. There's very few days where we can't be outside. It's oppressively hot just a little bit in the summer and oppressively cold just a little bit in the winter. But all those other 11 months out of the year, we can get outside. So that's definitely a good one. And then just to kind of be there for each other and show up for each other as much as we can. So
Yeah. I hope that you got something out of this episode. I know that I did. And so hope that you're able to take these tips. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. We'll see you the next time. Bye.